Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today, we will study together the final chapter of Eov, Sefer Eov, the book of Job, chapter 42, which is the conclusion of this book that we've been studying together since, I think it was February. I deeply appreciate those of you who have stuck with me this entire time. This book was probably the most difficult book to teach technically because translations of the words were so challenging. And of course, the subject matter is so emotionally difficult. And, just the interpretations of the lessons being taught. The final chapter is, of course, incredibly beautiful, full of lessons, so let's get to it. Vayan Eov es Adonai vayomar. So Eov responded to God. God just gave Eov this incredibly powerful speech, encouraging Eov to be humble, to recognize his tiny little place in the grand scheme of nature and the universe around him. And through humility, to accept that he will not and cannot understand the justice of God. But that through humility, through true humility, he can make the world better and reduce suffering by helping others learn the same lessons. So Vayan Eov es Adonai vayomar, Eov answered God as follows. Yadati, remember over and over and over again we've heard the lesson of Das and Bina, knowledge and understanding. Both recognizing that, in other words, recognizing that we need to learn and understand knowledge and understanding, but what is that knowledge and understanding? That we cannot know or understand God, right? That we can learn so much about the world around us, and we should, and we can, but through learning about the world around us that we can see and understand, we recognize our tiny, tiny little place in the scheme of things, and how small we are in comparison to the creator of it all, and how incapable we will ever be of understanding why he made things the way he did, which ultimately results sometimes in things that we see and experience that we don't understand, that don't match our small, puny sense of justice. So Eov says, Yodati, now I know, ki chol tu chol, that you are capable of everything. In other words, even things that are way beyond me as a human. V'lo yibatzer mimucha mezima, there isn't a single plan or strategy that you don't have, that you don't have access to. Who is it? In other words, me. Who is this guy who corrupted true counsel? Right. In other words, because I challenged you, I questioned your eitzah, I questioned your counsel, I questioned your wisdom. Who is that? Who is the one who did that? It's just me, B'li das. I did it without any knowledge. I did not have this knowledge that you have just given me. Lochein higadati. This is why I spoke v'lo avin at a time when I really did not understand. Right? Again, those languages of das and bina. Niflaos mimeni. These things were niflaos. They were way beyond me. They were wonders to me. The ways of God are way beyond me. V'lo ida. I did not know that. I thought I could challenge God and say, look, I'm righteous and I don't deserve this. Me and my small, tiny little sense of justice, I thought I can challenge you. I was the Malametza, but who am I? I'm a nobody. Shmana, please God, listen to me. Vanochi adaber. I will be the one who speaks now. In other words, it is me now, me that has learned this lesson of humility, not the me before that did not know this. Esholcha v'yodieni. I will ask, and now you will give me das, you will give me real knowledge, right? True knowledge only comes when one recognizes humility. If you're not humble, you cannot learn, you cannot know, you cannot discover new things. Without humility, you think you know everything. With humility, you recognize that you don't know anything and you have so much to learn. Now, God, now I can learn from you, God. L'shema ozen shmaticha, I was asking to hear you, right? But now that you've revealed yourself to me, Eini ra'ascha, my eyes have seen you. I was asking for a much lower level of understanding, thinking that you could just explain to me, well, I punished you because of X. No. It's much, 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 much more than that. Now I see what you mean. Now I see everything around me, and I recognize my small place. I recognize how humble I am. Now I can learn God. Now I'm open to learning. Show me the way. Alkeina emas v'nichamti. This is why I rejected. Emas in this context means I have finally rejected those primitive thoughts that I had before, v'nichamti, and I have found comfort. When one recognizes true humility, one doesn't feel depressed that he's so small. One feels comfort in acknowledging who he is in the place of this entire universe, which is just a tiny, 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 tiny little spot in this gigantic, tremendous, vast universe that is God's universe that he created. Al ofar ve'efer, I am just. Ofar, I am dirt and ashes. That's all I am. I am a nothing. I am a nobody. Now, it's important to recognize that after this response to Eov, that's it. That's all he says. Ofar ve'efer, I am dirt and ashes. Teach me. Now I can learn. God does not yet end the suffering until another quick episode, which is very important. This is verse 7. It was after God spoke these things, Eov to Eov. And this is kind of a challenge to Eov. Are you really humble? Let's see. Right? God says to Eliphaz, I am angry at you and your two friends. You have not spoken to me properly like my servant Eov. Presumably God is referring to Eov's most recent response, which was his recognition of humility. But even Eov's response before was at least based on honesty, at least based on the fact that Eov was saying, I don't understand. But you guys claimed that you understood. You were arrogant. You thought that you understood God. You thought that you can explain God in your simple-minded human way, right? God punishes, he must have been guilty, right? Even though, remember, Eliphaz spoke all kinds of grandiose, wonderful terms about God. He sounded so religious. He sounded so lofty, right? He and the friends talked about God's greatness and might and power. And of course, he's just and kind and all these kinds of things. So it must be you deserved it. But that didn't mean anything. That was, you did not, Glodi Barteme Lai Nechona, that wasn't proper speech. Because underlying every one of your speeches was the assumption that you understood, that you knew how God worked, and therefore you had the right to draw conclusions about Eov's guilt. That is the ultimate in arrogance. Who are you to think that you know God? That's not good. That's lo nechona. That's not proper. So what do you do? How do you achieve atonement? God does not say in verse 8, which we're about to read, achieve atonement by repenting to me and admitting your own humility. But go to Eov. Repent to him. Ask him for forgiveness. Right? Because when you wrong your friend, you have to ask forgiveness from your friend. You can't go to God after doing something bad to someone else and ask God to forgive you. That doesn't do nothing. Until that person forgives you, it's nothing. Now, take 7 cows of Shiva Elim and 7 rams. Remember, this is how they would pray in those days. They would pray through sacrifices of animals, through bringing their property to God. However, go to my servant Eov, and bring a sacrifice on your behalf. And Eov Abdi Yispalel Alechem. I know, because now that I know Eov has achieved humility, he will pray on your behalf. You can't pray. Your prayers are nothing. Because you wronged him. You wronged Eov. You insulted him. Yes, you insulted me too. And yes, of course, you have to pray to me too. But more importantly, you cannot achieve atonement until you ask Eov for forgiveness, and he prays for you. He will pray for you, Kim Panov Esau, because it is only he that I will listen to, that I will pay attention to. And stop myself and not to do suffering, in other words, cause punishment to you. It is only Eov that I will listen to. Why? Kilodi Barteme Lai Nechona Ki Avdi Eov. You did not speak about me properly like my servant Eov did. He spoke about me properly. I will listen to him. Because he is humble, I will listen to him. I will not listen to you. So Vayelchu Eliphaz Atimani Vildad Ashuchi Tzofar and Amasi, and the 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, went. Vayasu, and they did Kasher Diber Alehem Adonai, as God had spoken to them. This is Alehem with an Aleph, not Alehem with an Ayin, which would mean regarding them. but it's Alihem with an Aleph, which indicates that God spoke to Eliphaz and the two friends as well, gave them the same message. Vayisa Adonai es pnei Eov, and God listened to Eov, because Eov did pray for them. Va'adonai shaves shvus Eov, and God returned now. See, before Eov achieved humility, but he was still in a life of suffering. However, God did return the fortune of Eov, when he saw that his humility was so genuine that he did pray for his friends, despite the fact that they caused him so much pain by insulting him, by calling him guilty, by telling him that his suffering was his fault instead of giving him comfort. You can imagine how much pain they caused him, but nonetheless, because of his humility, Eov was able to recognize that the appropriate path is reconciliation, the appropriate path is forgiveness. By Yosef Adonai es kol asher le'Eov le'Mishnah, and God added everything that Eov had originally. He made it twice as much. And how did God restore those fortunes? Not by some miracle coming from heaven, but because the God told Eov, remember, how do you fix the problem of the world with humility? Teach the world humility. Get along with each other, and then you will end strife, you will end war if you get along with each other because you are humble. God restored Eov's fortunes as follows, as we see in verse 11, Eov's brothers and his sisters and everyone who knew him came, right, who knew him from before his suffering, the fanim from before, and they ate with him bread in his house. Bread is simple, it doesn't say he had a feast of meat, and this, he was still in his time of suffering. They came and they ate what he had, and they all sat together with him. Now that Eov had achieved humility, people came back to him, vayanudulo, and they comforted and consoled, vayinachmu, and they comforted him. Right? This just proves that Eov was still in the state of suffering when they came. On all of the evil, on all of the bad, the terrible fortune that God had brought upon him. And what did they do? And each person gave him a coin. And each person gave him a gold nose ring. So here you have the people starting to restore his fortunes. When Eov achieved humility, the lesson that Eov is learning is that when people work together to help each other, suffering can be alleviated. Maybe not everything, but so much can be helped if we only work together. Remember, God said in chapter 40, he said clearly, if you can teach people humility, which is obviously what he did with all of his friends, his brothers, sisters, etc., he taught them humility, he taught them forgiveness. That brought about peace, and that brought his fortunes back. And God blessed Eov at his end of his life even more than the beginning. And he had 14,000 sheep, and 6,000 camels, and 1,000 oxen that were on yokes capable of plowing, and 1,000 donkeys. And he had 7 sons, and 3 daughters. And then interestingly, it focuses on the daughters here. And he called one of his daughters Yemima, and it mentions what their names are, right? Of course, Ketzia is a type of a cutting of a Yemima means shines like the day, like the light of the day. Ketzia is the cuttings of herbs, like cuttings of a beautiful branch, and Keren Hapuch is the like the stone that glints light like crystal. That's what he named his daughters. There was no women as beautiful as Eov's daughters in the entire land. And their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. He treated his daughters equally. He treated his daughters with respect. It's fascinating how it focuses on these daughters and how Eov treated them. Because of his humility, he treated women just like he treated men. I know people might think I'm trying to read into it, modern sensibilities, but I'm just reading the words. That's what's there. What am I supposed to say? No, I'm not reading into it, nothing. It says that he treated his daughters, and it's complimenting him clearly for treating his daughters equally as his sons. And it goes out of its way to bring their names and how special they were. as opposed to talking about the sons. And after this, right, after treating his daughters that way, Acharei Zos, specifically this, he lived 140 years, and he merited to see his children and grandchildren for 4 generations. So he saw children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. And Eov passed away, elderly and content in his days, that he had lived a meaningful and powerful life. And oh, how meaningful and how powerful his life was, that influences us to this day. This concludes Sefer Eov. Ultimately, the lesson of humility is consistent with the lesson that we've seen over and over again throughout the books of the prophets that we've studied together. Be humble, and we can end suffering if we work together. Human beings can do it if we seek the knowledge that we can seek and understand and recognize the limitations of human beings, which helps us understand how small we are and helps us recognize through humility. It's only through humility that we can turn to others and forgive them for the wrongs that they have done to us, ask forgiveness for the wrongs that we have done to others, and go and give each person that ksita, that coin, that nezem zav, that gold ring, to help them reestablish themselves and get them back on their feet. We can do this together. As God said himself, if we do this together, if we recognize humility, there will be no more war, there will be no more strife, there will be no more fighting. And the answers to the questions of why often we see good people suffering, we will never know that answer, because we will never be able to understand the ways of God. But if we work together, we can help. We can make it better. If only we learn the lesson of humility. Thank you so much for studying the book of Eov together. Looking forward to moving on to the next book that I plan on studying with you, the book of Chronicles, Divrei HaYomim, which is very different. It's a book of history, but also so many profound lessons we will learn together and study. Have a wonderful day.